Welcome to the Pathmonk Presents podcast. My name is Sean Donnelly Lewis, and I'm really excited about today's episode. We're talking with the co-founders of OneFifty Consultancy, Katie Buckett and Alex Pearmain. Guys, welcome to the show.
All right, thanks for having us.
There was a little contention about who I was going to introduce first, but sorry, ladies first. Alex, I just went with the ladies.
The most important one first. It's all right.
Okay, let's talk about something we can all agree on. OneFifty Consultancy. What is it? What are you guys all about?
So we are a digital marketing consultancy, and our whole premise is putting data and what we call models of human behavior right at the heart of that. So what we do is we actually firstly look at how do people behave online, who are they and where are they, and therefore what should your marketing look like in order to mirror that.
Okay, and then so it sounds somewhat complicated, but also easy. Is this for big companies like Fortune 500 companies, or are you guys also helping mom and pop shops that are trying to move things with the Corona situation, trying to get stuff online?
So we say that we work best with two types of organizations, Davids and Goliaths. So your biggest blue chip companies, if we can change 1% of how they go to market, it makes a big difference. Or the Davids, the scaling up companies who are really changing status quo, for whom we can design a whole experience and change the whole go to market and really prove why there's a better way to do things, which is based on actually understanding behaviors and putting evidence at the heart.
Yeah, so we've got really big brands that we work with. So we've got O2, American Express, Toby Carvery, right through to brands that are more startups and growing really quickly, like Green Cola going up against Diet Coke, House of, a lighting brand. So it covers the whole spectrum.
And so how have you guys been able to grow the business? How long have you guys been around?
So we had our 5th birthday just in January. So yes, Alex and I, thanks. Alex and I started, just the two of us, some 5 years ago, at our kitchen tables. And we've now got 20 people within the team. We've got our office in Paddington in central London. And I think just in terms of growth, it's been a consistent focus, I think, on what we felt we were good at. And just remembering to keep that front of mind as we've gone through. So everything from, remaining with that data and behaviors at the core, and building out sort of the social media and digital marketing services and capabilities as part of that.
And have you guys
been... a big bit of what gets...
Go for it, Alex. Yeah.
So I think a big bit of what gets overlooked on this as well, certainly at least within marketing services, is focusing on growing your existing customer base by doing a really good job. Like obsess over the existing customers, especially if you're working with bigger brands where there's always scope to do more of the wider pie. And I think that's where we're really proud that our focus on the quality of the work and really investing in those relationships has driven a lot of that growth. And also because they're the same businesses that recommend us elsewhere too. So I think it's that just, if we're a software business, you talk about being product obsessed. For us, it's being client obsessed, like what's going to make that work really powerful.
Yeah, I think about a third of our the new clients that come through the door are from existing clients referring us.
Perfect. And then where does the more traditional, well, not traditional, but new traditional, so like SEO, digital marketing, do you guys do a little bit of that, or has it been mainly through referrals?
So I think early years was much more about referrals, largely because you've got less proposition to put to market, you've got less of case studies. But I mean, in the last year, we've won European Social Media Campaign of the Year from DigiDay. We were UK Digital Agency of the Year from the PRCA. And so that sort of recognition plus client base, obviously you start to see better conversion from some of the inbound digital marketing that we run across, SEO, paid social. Partly these are the services we offer clients, so we've got to do it ourselves, of course. But we find actually that stuff you mentioned earlier about awareness phase, that combination of, they work with brands like that, they do work like this, I've seen from awards programs, but then putting it in front of people through the digital channels that they're living on, because none of us have a choice right now, in whichever version of lockdown you're in across Europe, means that suddenly actually that's a really powerful combination from our kind of proving we've got that kind of track record, but then making it digitally visible to people. Then when they come to site, actually doing quite a lot of focus on in-depth content. We think the thing that makes a difference there that we do is we publish a lot of research that maybe other consultancies would keep to themselves. We put that out there and we're like, look, have it. We'd rather shift the whole picture than just kind of sit on this proprietary information. And so that gives then a depth from the website, but also that then we can continue those journeys, get into the right conversations based on that particular area of interest someone might have, whether that is exec comms digitally, how can we build profile for our leaders, all the way through to digital demand gen for a consumer brand. You know, how do you do that in a D2C environment? Because we've got quite a broad spread on those sorts of things.
Yeah, and you touched on the website for a second. What would you guys say is some of the strengths of your website? I think it looks really great, by the way. I love the neon colors. I love
thanks.
it.
Spent a long time on that 5 years ago.
Aesthetically pleasing. But what would you say is some of the strengths in your eyes?
I think it does look good, not just because I was instrumental in putting it together when we first did it. But I think it does look good. I think it's sort of easy to navigate. And I think we've got a really good in-depth blog on there that, you know, people just from the stats that we've seen do spend a lot of time on it. It's where we release a lot of our research. It's where we go more in depth in, okay, Giphy, what do you need to know about it? Why is it important? Why does anyone care? What can you achieve there? I think as we sort of evolve, Alex and I have been talking a lot about the website and how we actually just make sure we're putting across, okay, so what is our offering? What can we actually do? Because I think the breadth of what we do and what you were pointing out at the beginning is quite wide, and just having enough that people can go onto there and go, oh yes. And I think probably at some point we might need to put some case studies on there, I think is one area.
And so, okay, sorry, Alex. Did you have something to add?
I think it's where it's the interesting bit is, for me at least, of our challenge is our different buyer personas. So people who might potentially buy our services range from deeply sophisticated and very technical on an area of our services through to very strategic senior marketers and operations individuals who therefore want to buy a solution but maybe don't know the exact service mix that they're looking for, to on the other hand people who really lack any access point but simply know we need to do digital and we need someone who can guide us through that process. And I think that's our single biggest challenge, you know, when you're saying strengths and challenges, is how you actually build a site and a digital profile which works for all those three very different buying levels of knowledge and competency. If we were simply doing deep technical digital services, it'd be easy. If we were just doing that kind of total, I don't know what I'm doing and take my problem away, it'd be easy. But it's speaking to all those three personas, which is where I think we can and need to do a better job for future. The aesthetic runs through everything. Please depict it out because it's important to what the services we provide as well. And also making sure it's kind of culturally relevant across a number of different territories, because we do about 50% of our work is within the UK, the other 50% is EMEA/global. And so actually just very different contexts from people visiting. And although we tend to stick simply to English language for reasons of simplicity in an international operating environment, also we're even speaking to that where, you know, I know you speak other languages, Sean, like actually just technical language for digital services across different territories can vary massively as well. And we need to make it accessible enough, which I think gets overlooked a lot of the time, at least if you're Anglo-centric like we are from London. It's fine, everyone gets it, it's English. They'll get every single last nuance.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I obviously being American, right? There's even terms in English that you guys use that we wouldn't use, right? I have a technical background. And so even just creating manuals, they would say brackets. And I think we would say like holders or something like that. So depending on the specificity, it can be really hairy. Yeah. And then obviously the cultural aspect of your website, right? Obviously you have people coming from different backgrounds, even expecting marketing to look different depending on the background. Yeah. And coming back to what you guys do, your consulting, obviously it's a pretty busy space, right? There's a lot of occupancy. What would you guys say that you do a little bit differently? You know, I won't say better, but if you say better, then I'll allow it. Right? But what do you guys do differently opposed to the other people in the same space?
Absolutely. I mean, well, so that's the first interesting bit is in the same space, we are in a busy space where we believe we sit at the intersection of a number of different competitor worlds. So we often pitch against your kind of big global consultancy firms, you know, your EYs, etc., those guys. Then we also pitch against traditional creative agencies, so the advertising world. And then we're also up against kind of media agencies and that much more performance-driven world that people have looked to. And each of those three have really different strengths. And on a Venn diagram, if you can sit in the middle of all three and say, we can do the strategic planning and data analysis on a par with a global consultancy, we can then put it into an executional environment for marketing, which has the rigor of a media agency and that kind of performance planning, but with the aesthetic, creative, and go-to-market capability of the creative agency. That, I mean, which client doesn't want it, right? That for us is the sweet spot. Now, I'm going to say we execute on that brilliantly every single time, obviously. But that is for us what's different. It's how we bring those things together. I think that's our first big one. Our second thing that we talk about a lot is we are 100% just ruthlessly focused on excellence. So we're not going to be the cheapest option. So we've got to be brilliant, because that's our promise to a client. We're going to charge you a bit more than maybe the kind of baseline for the market is, but we're going to be a lot better. And that keeps us on our toes and actually leads to a very high client expectation, which means we've got to meet it. We think that's really positive for the team. And that leads to the sort of third differentiator is we've got a really diverse set of people in the agency. And I think the word diverse can obviously mean a lot of different things to different people. We literally just mean massively different backgrounds of all types. So we've got people who are professional athletes on the one hand, all the way over to people who are market researchers by background over here, with people from, I think there's about 5 different nationalities across the team, or 5 different passports at any rate, which again, to that bit of cultural diversity and different perspectives on those bits. And that's really different, because I think a lot of the time, the people we're up against can be quite culturally homogenous. They're all consultancy people, or they're all kind of ad agency people or whatever, and that's the world they've come up in, and we deliberately try and steer away from that. So we've got relatively few people who've got traditional marketing agency backgrounds. We think that's a really big strength.
Yeah. And so thinking about, it's always interesting to me to see a structure of a company that's doing a lot of different things, that has a lot of moving parts, or consulting agency as well. When you guys have a potential, let's say, I'm just going to use business language, right? A hot lead. What does that look like going from sales to marketing? Do you guys even have sales to marketing? How are you guys structured at the moment? And then if you have a potential customer, walk me through the process of getting that from the beginning to completion.
Yeah, so we're a small growing business, right? So unfortunately we don't have all the luxuries of having a good sales team, and then it sort of gets filtered through to Alex and I. We do have people who specialize on the BD front, so it's one of the areas that I do a lot on, and we've got one other person that does that as well. So it'd be a case of getting out there, chatting to people. Got the hot lead, absolutely amazing. So we do an initial scoping call with them to assess, okay, so what's your big challenge? One of the things we love is, okay, what's that big question you want the answer to? What's that issue? What's that commercial challenge? Because that's the thing we can really get our teeth into, and then look at, okay, so if we start up here, what are all the bits that can come off of that, and how could we help to answer that question? So it'd be a case of doing that scoping call, and then we can actually look at, okay, so what do you actually need? What are the capabilities? And we can form a team around that. So that's when I'd drag Alex into it and actually talk through, okay, so this is the challenge. I think what is needed is our production team is going to be key here. Actually, we need our head of data. She needs to be on it. So then we can start thinking up the solutions and the answers to what they need based on what's best for them. And then invariably it either is a proposal across to them, or it is, some sort of pitch scenario where we can hopefully, we've usually got sort of a 50-50 chance of that being successful.
And I think what we've seen that's been unhelpful from the virtual world, as it were, is that relationship building bit of really debating a proposal in person. What I think is unhelpful for the world we operate in about it is, let's say if you've got maybe one key project sponsor on the client side, someone who's going to work on it at an operational level, and 3 or 4 stakeholders. I've already got 6 people on the Zoom. Then they want to see a matchup from our side of equivalent. And I defy anyone to find a positive 2-hour meeting with 10 people on it on Zoom. It's not going to happen. And so actually that, and often that, I think really matters both from a client and supplier side of really going, right, is this going to work? Because there's 10 people around the table, and this is really the dynamic we're going to need to generate. So I think that's been a real challenge. So I think we've seen a slight skew over the last year towards slightly more technical, drier, kind of everything in a document type presentations. which is good and bad. I think it gives you a much more accurate scope of work, and that's useful for people, and they can make a much more objective comparison. But it misses some of the, we're going to be in a partnership for somewhere between 3 months to 3 years, depending on the nature of that particular engagement. Actually, how we're going to work on a day-to-day level, and I think that's where some of the process, it's no one's fault, but that's where I think we're really missing some of that at the moment. And I think I look forward to, in a post-pandemic world, as keeping some of the efficiency of this current setup, but with the add-in of that ability to just check working relationships and do the gut check on everyone around the table together. How's this going to work?
Yeah. I haven't had a Zoom meeting with 10 people, at least in a business sense, but it's hard enough to do a podcast with 3 people. But I just want to switch gears a little bit and talk about you guys, right? And not so much business, a little bit more about yourself. How do you guys stay, growing as professionals and as people? What kind of content do you consume?
Alex consumes about 10,000 pieces a day, don't you? Then you distill it to me.
Yeah. So Katie and I have very different kind of media consumption habits. I think so. I am a big believer in RSS readers, and I still mourn the demise of Google Reader back in the day. And for those who don't use RSS all the time, it's automated feeds from your favorite sources, so blogs, news sites, etc., into one single aggregator. So that way I'm going through 400 plus different titles every morning based on various stuff. And that sounds ridiculous. Half the time I'm checking, I'm like, headline, don't care. That I'm interested in. But it means I read a lot more diversity than you otherwise would. And also it means I can blend mainstream news with quite technical publications through to quite lifestyle type stuff. And I think one of the big bits for me is, I'm a 36-year-old bloke who lives in the UK. I could easily just get sucked into only looking at bikes, beer, and business news. And actually keeping that breadth of perspective is really important. And I find that's really useful, combined with Twitter, which, although you can get an echo chamber there, if you deliberately try and avoid it, it's still one of the most valuable ways for cutting edge. You just have to be conscious of where you'll drift naturally. And people like to blame the social media platforms. They should look at themselves first as to, if you're only saying one set of things, that's down to your behaviors. So I've got a real breadth there. And then what we also do within the team, which is very valuable, is we've been Slack-based since day one, 5 years ago. We've never sent an internal email to each other, and we push the team to share everything that they read that they think semi-interesting. So we've therefore got a much bigger pool from within that 20-plus set of people who are all very different individuals. Whereas Katie, who I like to take the mick out of endlessly for this, consumes media as if she's about a 68-year-old woman who's retired. It's quite something.
This is very unfair. This is very unfair. I'm not on the Daily Express yet, No, I don't. It's because I watch BBC News every morning when I'm sort of getting ready to start my working day. I just have it on in the background. It's useful just to see what, generally the nation is being exposed to. And Alex does not consume that, and I don't read as much information as Alex does. We've got a really amazing way within the business that we can sort of shortcut some of the most interesting things to read. FT Economist are always sort of top of mind, but as Alex said, it is really important for us to be quite broad. It's so easy, and you can see it in so many sort of meetings, not only with OneFifty, but when you're talking to other people, that we're all just quite homogenous in marketing, and we all see things from quite a similar-ish point of view. And you've really, our client base is not like that. So you have to force yourself out of that and think, okay, so this is a very different set of people than me. They have very different sort of thoughts and feelings. They live in a very different place. How is it that I can sort of see things a bit more from their point of view, rather than it all sort of just being a bit middle of the road?
I think that's a particular problem. I mean, there's been a lot of attention on political polarization across the world in the last couple of years. And this is not to belittle the seriousness of the consequences that can have. But also, if you work in a sort of marketing-led space, typically there's a liberal progressive consensus. Now, regardless of your personal politics, whether you think that's good or bad, the point is that isn't the entire of the world. And the lack of failure from marketing organizations to reflect on the reality of and do justice to, there are perfectly valid moral and intellectual reasons to be politically and socially conservative. And actually ignoring that reality for a lived experience for a lot of the world ignores your ability to connect with them meaningfully. So I'm not advocating for here indulging extremism, but just mainstream responsible conservatism with a small c for British viewers. feel what you want about party politics, but actually just reflect the reality of the people who are behaving responsibly and reasonably, rather than imposing on it necessarily the worldview of a lot of very urban-centric, liberal, progressive types of marketing, of which I am, of course, one of them. So I'm criticising myself here, but it is important we try and check on that. And so that's what we encourage the team a lot through freedom of expression around the things they've read. It's not endorsing something to discuss it and share it within the team, but it is relevant for people to see that stuff.
Yeah, but I think it's cool that you guys actually know that each other consume different content or lack of it. You know what I mean? Like I think even in a business sense, that's really interesting because you're both kind of able to understand the different customer or the whole picture, if that makes sense, right? Like I think that's actually something that's really, really interesting and cool.
Yeah, and Alex can get really deep into things and go down some rabbit holes. So I'm always his test bed for should he tell anyone else about whatever this thing is, and will anyone else actually care? I'm like, I fell asleep about 5 minutes ago, Alex. Let's.
Well,
sometimes though, or a lot of the time, it's great.
Ready for it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Although the other day I finally got the opportunity in a relevant professional setting to talk about sourdough bread in great detail, and it was just a liberating moment for me. I've been holding back on all of this, and finally someone wanted to know it. But jokes aside, I think it's an important part of Katie and I's dynamic. So we've got an analogy that we like to use as to how our roles separate across the business, which Katie objects to the way I tell it, this analogy, so I'll let her do it.
I don't object. You just had a few that I did object to. So essentially, so if you go to a restaurant, I'm the maitre d', so I'll be inviting you in, make sure you've got your table you want to sit at, your meal comes on time, and if there's anything wrong, then I will go and sort that out, and I'll go back to head chef Alex. He didn't like it when I called him a sous chef the other day. And he is in the back of the kitchen, actually making sure that everything goes out is absolutely spot on. And if there's things we need to tweak and change, and building in feedback from all the lovely customers that come and eat with us, that I'm then taking that and saying, right, Alex, do you know what we need? We really do need less carrots. Nobody loves those, or whatever it might be. But it's quite a good way of explaining what our different roles are, because I think when you're sort of co-founders, one of the things we found at the beginning, it's very easy to try and both do the same thing, which isn't very efficient.
So since we're slowly coming to the end of the show, I do want to try you guys out in the rapid fire session.
Oh.
Are you guys feeling lucky?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and I'll start with you, Katie, and then I'll just ask the question, and then the next one obviously will go to you, Alex. So, okay, Katie, what was the last book that you read?
Chimp Paradox.
Alex, what is the single thing that your company is focused on at the moment?
Preparing for what comes next post-pandemic.
Katie, if there were no boundaries in technology, what would be the one thing you would want to have fixed for your company?
Access to amazing quality staff.
All right. Alex, what was the last thing that kept you awake at night about your company?
Actually, it's something that I do regularly, which is unhealthy but helpful, which is what would mean we're not here in 10 years' time. And then I work backwards to when those issues begin. And then I try and identify them, which is like a really fun party game if you really don't want to go to sleep. Imagine existential dread and just explore it in detail.
All right, everyone, that was Katie and Alex from OneFiftyConsultancy.com. Usually we just give the last word to you guys. So if you want to sum up everything that we talked about, or if you feel like there's something about your company that I missed, yeah, the floor is yours.
So I think one of the big bits that we talk to people about regularly, and I think it's really important at the moment for every business to understand, is that there are two major things that are going to go on in the world in the next few years. The first is the internet is going to continue to change and drive that change. So that's one thing. The other is things are about to get a whole lot better. And actually you put those two together and you go, the world's about to get better. The internet is going to be the force that drives that. So you can listen to the noise about the problems of the internet, and those are real, or you can focus on the positives and what that means for your organization and for you as an individual. And that's where I think people should at the moment be forward-looking, progressive, and get behind whatever that's going to mean for their organization, because that's where the market opportunity is.
Katie, did you want to add to that?
I can't really top that, so I'm going to leave that as the last word. Well done.
Great, guys.
Thanks
for your time today. Check them out, OneFiftyConsultancy.com. Alex, Katie, thanks for your time.
Thanks.